wide receivers in the history of the NFL, book that I did years ago. Now we into the top 10. Not the finish whole top 10, I don't think, today. So it's going to be 5 videos done this afternoon. So we're going to start with Harold Jackson, the epitome of an underrated wide receiver that people don't know about. Let's get into why he's underrated. Harold Jackson is arguably the most unrecognizable great wide receiver in the history of the NFL. In his second season, Jackson emerged as a star top flight receiver. He had 65 catches for 1,116 yards receiving, including 9 touchdowns. He led the league in reception in 1972. In 1973, Jackson had his best game ever when he caught 7 passes for 238 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Dallas Cowboys. He was a successful receiver as a Philadelphia Eagle, then was traded to New England Patriots, resulting in a dynamic duo alongside Stanley Morgan. They were one of the more dynamic duos as a receiving tandem during the late 70s and early 80s. In 1979, Jackson had 1,013 receiving yards, including 7 touchdowns. Jackson had 29 career 100-yard games, 1,000 receiving yards for a season. When he retired, only Don Maynard had more career receiving yards than Jackson. For the decade of the 70s, Jackson was first in receptions, 432 yards, 7,724, and receiving touchdowns, 61. Despite this great productivity, Jackson was not one of the wide receivers selected to the NFL's All-Decade team for the 70s and not in the Hall of Fame. Overall, he had 579 receptions, 10,372 receiving yards, including 76 touchdowns. So Harold Jackson is definitely the epitome of an underrated wide receiver. Look at the productivity that he brought to the table, but he's still not, a Hall of Famer. Now, other reasons why he's underrated because he spent his career as a highly productive threat, run-heavy, defensive-minded teams, playing in an era that heavily featured the run. He was frequently overshadowed by teammates on dominant dynasties, moved between 5 franchises, missed out on the NFL All-Decade team, despite leading the decade in receiving yards. Think about that. He should be on the All-Decade team. He led the league, the whole decade of the 70s in receiving yards. He had the most receiving yards. Not Lynn Swann, not John Starworth, not Drew Pearson, people like that. Also, run-first era and team scheme. That's one of the reasons defensive focus, because Jackson played most of his career with conservative, defensive-minded, run-heavy coaching staffs like the Rams, the Philadelphia Eagles, which limited passing opportunities. Revolutionary efficiency. Despite team schemes, he led the entire NFL in receptions, 432, receiving yards, 7,724, and receiving touchdowns, 61. That's for the whole decade of the 70s. But he still wasn't on the All-Decade team, let alone the Hall of Fame. Lack of postseason success is a reason why he's underrated. Few national spotlights. Jackson played on several teams that struggled or rarely made deep playoff runs, hurting his national media exposure compared to receivers that was on Super Bowl winning teams. Frequent trades and journeyman stigma. Thanks for 14 people tuning in. Thanks for the person hitting the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Jackson played on 5 different teams, so he didn't have like a hometown franchise to play with. The Rams, the Eagles, the Patriots, the Vikings, and the Seahawks. So moving around for him from being established as a deep-rooted legacy or a dedicated hometown fan base to advocate for his candidacy as a Hall of Famer. The fourth thing is that he was underrated because he was overshadowed by the flashy contemporaries, the deep threat label, because he averaged an incredible 17.9 yards per catch. For his career, critics lazily characterized him strictly as a one-divisional deep threat rather than elite precision route runner he actually was. And also, he was snubbed on an All-Decade team for the 70s. Despite posting up superior numbers to several wide receivers that was chosen for the NFL 70s All-Decade team, he was notably left off the list. It just don't make no sense. Then you got playing before the pass-heavy era. When Jackson retired in 1983, he had 10,372 receiving yards and 76 touchdowns. A massive feat in the run-heavy era before the league opened up the passing game. So at the time of his retirement, only Don Maynard had more receiving yards than this guy. So when you look at the thumbnail, you see the picture of this guy, Harold Jackson. He's the epitome of an underrated wide receiver of the highest order. Didn't make the All-Decade team in the 70s, despite all the numbers that he put up. Not in the Hall of Fame. So he's the guy the most unrecognizable great wide receiver in the history of the NFL that people don't know about. You know what I'm saying? So when I put together this book a decade ago, I did a lot of research. I checked this guy out. This guy put up some great numbers, but he's never mentioned. You never see him on the highlight films or anything like that. But he's not in the Hall of Fame, and he was on the All-Decade team, despite all the stuff that he was doing. So he's number 10 on my list, the 10th underrated wide receiver in the history of the NFL, according to this book that I did years ago. Here it is right here. The top 50 underrated NFL wide receivers. So that's it, man. I'll come back at the bottom of the hour and do number 9. Who's the 9th underrated wide receiver? You stay tuned, you'll find out. Until then, talk to you soon.